Well, we're going to begin with Parshat Vayetzei. This is really a very complicated parsha. I find it a very complicated parsha. It's not like last week's parsha, which, although last week's parsha was not simple. It was accessible in the sense that we relate to the characters and we relate to the dilemma. We are located in the context of family, and we're located in the context of the civil relationships.
Everything okay?
And
So
so the notion that we it's easy to relate to. This parsha is much more difficult to relate to because it's dealing with, at the beginning, a journey and the dream, and this remarkable dream. And the dream is rooted in the reality of the ancient world. It's angels, it's, signs, symbols, and things that are very different from our own milieu. Plus the fact that it's a journey by foot, plus the fact that Jacob will be, with his cousin, etc., etc. It's a much more complicated story. I want to focus at the beginning. I want to focus at the beginning of the story on the dream of what is, we usually say it's Jacob's ladder, Sulam Yaakov. The real question as to what it is, what a Sulam is, I think needs to be explored. The thing is most often depicted as a ladder, but it may have been an elevated platform or a ziggurat, which was common in Babylonia, a staged platform, which had a staged pyramid-like structure in which the angels were going up and down on this structure. Okay, and so let me share the screen with you and share the text with you, and here it is. Okay, so Jacob sets out on his journey. Everyone see this? Give me a head, okay? So, Vayetzei Jacob mi Beersheva vayelech Harana. Jacob left Beersheva and set out for Haran. Vayifka b'makom. Vayalen sham kiva hashemesh. He came upon a certain place and stopped there for the night. Vayikach me'avnei hamakom. He took from among the stones. Vayasem merashotav. Vayishkav b'makom ahu. He takes of the stones, put it under his head, and lay down in that place. Vayachalom. V'hinei sulam mutzav arza. He dreams, and in the dream, a stairway was set on the ground, v'rosho magia shamayma, and its top reached the sky. V'hinei malache Elohim olim v'yordim bo, and behold, the angels of God were going up and down it. V'hinei Adonai nitzav alav, and God was standing beside him. Vayomar, and he says, Ani Adonai Elohei Avraham Avicha, Elohei Yitzchak. I am the Lord, your God, of father of Abraham and the God of Isaac. Haaretz asher ata shochev aleha lecha etnena ulezarecha. The land, the ground on which you are lying, I will assign to you and your offspring. Vaya zaracha ka'afara aretz. Your seed descendants shall be as the dust of the earth. Ufaratzta yama vakedma v'tafona vanegba. You shall spread out to the west, to the east, to the north, and to the south. And all the families of the earth shall bless themselves in your descendants. Okay? So here you have this extraordinary moment. Again, we're going to just rehash it. where Jacob is on the journey. He doesn't have very much with him because he doesn't even have a blanket. He doesn't have a pillow, doesn't have anything really. And he sees stones. He takes the stones and he makes a pillow out of it. And then he has a dream. And in the dream, he sees angels going up and going down a, a, a ladder or staged platform. And God speaks to him. And God says things that are already reminiscent for us, they echo for us. It's the echo of earlier blessings that God has said to Abraham and even Isaac. He says, I will assign you the land, and your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth. We are familiar with that. You shall spread out to the west, the east, the north, and the south. And that, of course, is the song that we like to sing with that, Ufaratzta. Ufaratzta, Ufaratzta, Yama, Vakedma, Tzaponav, Hanegba. It's so hard not to hear that song, even though it's was written in the 70s, I think, Shlomo Carlebach. And it's about spreading out, spreading out. All right, so before we go on with that, let's just try and get into the character of Jacob and try and examine what he must be going through. What is he thinking at this time? What's going through his mind? Just go ahead, Marlene.
Why did he set out with nothing? It wasn't like he was going on a tiyul just for one day. It says he was going from one place to another. He took no provisions.
So you can answer that question by offering some kind of a hypothesis. Look, when he was rushing out, he was in a rush. He didn't have time.
Took a bottle of oil.
So he had some oil. That is fascinating because the oil will then appear in the story as he pours oil over the stone. Okay, but what's that?
He must have had a knapsack. They just don't mention it.
So again, you think that he had things. He doesn't really have very much.
Rocks make for bad dreams.
What's that?
A rocky pillow makes for bad dreams.
Well, you know, you've never been camping, okay? So Sheldon is on here sometimes, and no, I don't see him. So if you go camping, you might discover. I mean, today camping is glamping, right? So you glamp because you have so many luxuries with regard to what you do. But I mean, not too long ago, camping was not so glamorous. You didn't have very much equipment. The tents leaked, et cetera, and a sleeping bag. You didn't take a pillow because a pillow would take up too much room in your pack. So you ended up, I can remember going on camping trips where you take clothing and you just put it under your head as a pillow, or you take whatever.
Rocks.
Right. The rocks. Okay. So there's some.
Now they make inflatable pillows, so they don't take space.
Here, I want to say that there are two reasons why Jacob takes a rock or rocks. One of which is although it's a little bit difficult to imagine, the rock serves a function. That it's a pillow.
Foreshadowing, though, too,
Indeed.
because later he's going to build with it.
Right. So the second thing is that it more than foreshadowing, the rock, the motif of rocks in the stories of Jacob, that is his signature. Every story in which Jacob is present from here on in contains rocks, including when he meets Rachel at the well, he pulls a rock off, and including when he comes back from Lavan, he sets up a rock. Each patriarch has a kind of signature motif with them, and this is his. Jacob is the rock. I'm not exactly sure why, and we don't need to go into it now, but it
represents power.
Well, it does represent power, and it represents steadfastness, and it could represent, a whole bunch of other things as well. Okay.
Rabbi,
Yes.
the Egyptians and the Egyptian tombs, they have beds.
Right.
The beds have a wooden strip for your head. So it's not so unusual for them to sleep on a hard surface.
Right. Okay. So and the other thing is, we don't know what time of the year it was. I'm assuming it was not at a rainy time of the year. I mean, I was listening to some reports recently in Israel. There was some big rainstorms and lots of flooding, and so it would not be a good thing to travel during this time of the year. Okay, so it's possible that he traveled at a time which was less than flooding. Okay, another let's go back to the character though. He has just had an experience. So what must be going through his mind as he was running away from his brother?
I hear you all of a sudden.
Okay, good. What must be going away from his mind? What was going in his mind? Anybody? All right. Well, let me go ahead, Ilana.
Well, he's going to meet new people that he never met before. So he's probably thinking how he should approach or behave or handle the meeting. And maybe he's worried about Esau running after him. But I have another thing here.
Yes.
The angels going up
Yes.
and down. I know it's symbolically for something, Aliyah, לצורך ירידה, and all this, but maybe you can come up with why are the angels going up first and then coming down? It could have been written the other way.
That's correct. So the commentaries deal with that quite extensively, and they're basically saying there are angels that are escorting him out of the land, and with the angels coming down will re-escort him back to the land. I think it's much more complicated than that, and here it's it has to do with the fact that this place, Beth El, later becomes Bethel and may in fact be also identified with Jerusalem. This is the place that's connected to heaven, right? And that's not the part I want to focus on right now, but I think the idea that the place itself holds significance, ought to indicate that things from us are going up and things from heaven are coming down. That's my best guess, but I think it's much more complicated than that. All right. So we have the whole notion that for Jacob is left at a very, very tremulous time. It's a very, very difficult time. He is on the one hand running away from his life, and on the other hand, he is also he has accomplished two things in his early life that have made him somewhat flawed, right? In this last week's Parsha, he managed to connive his way to the birthright, and he also stole the blessing from his brother.
And he lied to his father.
So unless he is a psychopath, which means he is comfortable, lying and dealing mischievously, then he would not have any pangs of guilt. But here he is And correctly, as you say, Ilana, you know, he's going to be going to a new place. And I mean, I smiled when you were saying that because it almost sounded like he's going off to camp and he wants to meet new people, meet new friends. Right? And that's not exactly what's going to happen there. What's going to happen is that he's going to get a comeuppance there. Now that he's going to meet his uncle Lavan, and just as he tricked his brother, Lavan is going to trick him. And
It runs
meeting,
in the family. It runs in the
it
family.
runs in the family. Meeting his the women that he's going to marry. This is obviously important to him, but it's also something that he is apprehensive about and anxious about. Let me take you into an interesting analysis of this, written by the Israeli writer. He's a biblical historian, a biblical. His name is Yair Jakovitz. Yair Jakovitz. This is his book, Yaakov, Asipur Maftia Shel Avi Ha'uma. Yaakov, Asipur Avi Ha'uma. It's also translated into English, Jacob, the Father of the Nation, by the Yale Judaica series. Okay, and I'm going to just share that with you now. Here it is. I'm going to go just a second. Okay. The stairway set on the ground and its head reached the sky. People can flee their pursuers while never breaking free of their conscience and past. Jacob escaped his brother's wrath, but he left behind an elderly, blind father and a loving and worried mother, without knowing whether he would see them ever again. If he did turn to glance back, he caught a parting glimpse of his country, the wide fields in which he had shepherded his flocks, and stretched out above them open sky. Who can know his thoughts in those moments? Did he reflect on his behavior toward his twin brother? Did he feel regret? The uncertainty of his present journey into an unknown fate must have weighed heavily on him. And into this mixture of thoughts and emotions, fear, and possibly shame, perhaps the mission on which his father sent him was beginning to stir some hope. Hope of finding a woman he would love and whose arms he might find comfort, a friend to confide in. It is not the way of biblical narrators to examine and reveal the thoughts and emotions of their heroes. Instead, we are left to make do with what we have, with what they choose to narrate. So I want to stop there and just get your reactions, or just kind of articulate them a little more, and say that while the text itself is not giving us any clues into the emotional state of Jacob, it's left to us, the reader, to try and figure that out. And so what we're trying to figure out, and Ellie, we're going to get to in a second, is what is going on in his mind. So unmute, Ellie. You need to unmute. I can't hear you. Ellie Ehrlich, you need to unmute your...
Okay, now I'm unmuted.
Yeah, go ahead.
I see something in Jacob, or I'm missing something in Jacob. I never see Jacob making a decision for himself. Even when he fed his brother this red stew, he didn't say, Esau, I'm going to make something for you. Esau said, I'm hungry, give me something. His mother said, go and run away. His mother puts his brother's clothes on him. I mean, he keeps taking direction or the lead from other people. He never says anything himself. He's pushed along, and I just see him as a very weak character. It's not until later on in the story that he develops a little bit of something. And even then, I mean, the whole business with Gina later on is just, he gets pushed into things by other people.
So I'm not sure I totally agree with you, although I agree with you partially.
Yeah.
Right? He takes direction from his mother. That certainly makes him passive. The fact that he's described as Ishtam Yoshevo Alim, he is homebody. He dwells in tents. That he tells us that he's a bit of a mommy's boy. The fact that she loves him, all of that. But he has initiative when it comes to the sale of the birthright. And he does, if we read closely in the story, he does take certain kinds of initiative. Here, and here's where I think your observation is very valuable. He's all alone.
Yeah.
So this is the first time in his life that he has to determine his own fate, and that is going to be an important theme in this story.
You
that
know,
he has to determine his own destiny. Tova, go ahead.
I just want to say he's my least likable character, and I never understood why we have to call him Avinu. I don't respect him. I don't like him. And if you take these characters seriously, which sometimes depends, okay. And then, of course, the angels. I'm sorry I came late, so maybe you discussed it already. Is that it's his conscience fighting with each other, going up, going down, maybe going up to heaven, going down to earth, and his negative side wins. That's how I feel towards it. He's fighting with the angel. The angel maybe is saying to him, "Hey, what did you do, or what are you going to be?" There's something there. To me, he's a sleazy character.
Okay.
And even when he does the dealing with Lavan, I'm going to take this, you take that. There's something there. Tell me what you like about him, please.
I'll tell you what I like about him, in that he, first of all, the wrestling with the angel is next week's parsha. These are the angels going up and down the platform or the ladder. Look,
yeah.
What I like about him is that there's a certain reality to him, and that the Torah, and here I'm going to say what I like more about the Torah is that the Torah doesn't shy away from directing itself to the reality and the complexity of the character, and that part of being Yisrael is to be engaged in that constant conflict with what is expected of you. The moral condition of a human being is to be in constant struggle with what you are and what you ought to be. And in a way, Yisrael, the name itself, but the character also reflects that existential ideal, that were we not to struggle with this, our lives certainly would be uninteresting, but our lives would be amoral. To be a moral person means that you need to be in a constant engagement with what you need to be and what you need to live up to. And he is, I think, I wouldn't go so far as to say he's a sleaze, but I would say, in much more polite terms, he's a complicated character. There's tremendous levels of complexity to him, including regret and shame, including the sense of failure, the sense that he did not live up to this, and the sense of that up until now he has not determined his own fate. He correctly said, Ellie, he has been passive to his mother, to his father. He has been without I wouldn't say without the love of his father, but he has certainly been diminished in his parents' eyes. He is living in the midst of a conspiracy, and he has to break free from that. And this is the moment that he has to break free of that. I find his story enriching because it's loaded with symbolism, and the symbols of Jacob, similar to Abraham, are symbols of boundary. The moment, the sleep moment is a moment of entering into a different consciousness. That is, I think, what is being represented here. He is experiencing a revelation, meaning he is experiencing an altered moment of consciousness in which information is being given to him in a way that that completely and totally surprises him. That's what he says when he wakes up. I'm surprised, God is present in this place. So he is experiencing a new thing, and it seems that while he is not forgiven yet, it doesn't say that God, I forgive you for stealing the birthright from your brother and stealing the blessing from your father. It doesn't say that, but there is a validation here that God is validating you are the one that the blessing is going to go to, and God is validating that you are the one that is going to make this family now. No, one of the overarching problems in these stories is, God has been saying for 2 generations already, for over 100 years, I'm going to make you a nation. I'm going to make you a nation. I'm going to make you a nation. So God takes Abraham, I'm going to make you a nation. There's no nation. And Abraham barely succeeds in having 1 child, maybe 2. And then only after that does he start producing children. With Isaac, I'm going to make you a nation. I'm going to make you a nation. There's no nation. And so Jacob is in a family narrative in which the promise has been given to his father and his grandfather over and over again, and he has nothing to show for it. So now he's got literally nothing, and God is basically saying, "Here, this is it. You are it. You are the one that is going to be the father of this nation." So he has an affirmation and a validation that he is the one, and yet, as anyone who has ever been elected or chosen to a particular role will tell you, is unless again they are somewhat they have somewhat unbalanced psychologically, they may have a moment in which they experience, am I worthy of this? Do I deserve this? And what about all the skeletons in my closet that have made me unworthy? There is a bit of, it's called the imposter syndrome. Am I worthy of the position that has been placed upon me, or the responsibilities that have been placed on me? Look at, Moses is a perfect example of this later on, because Moses, he has run away to Midian. This is after committing an act of manslaughter. Moses, is much more complicated than Jacob ever was. And at the beginning, when God says to Moses, I've heard everything, I'm sending you back. And Moses goes like, who am I? What do you want from me? Marlene, you had your hand up there.
Yes, I have 2 comments.
Okay, then Alana, go ahead. Marlene,
No,
then
just
Alana. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Um,
Actually, from birth, we see that Jacob is very aggressive
Yes.
because he's taking the heel of his brother, and he wants to be first. So there is some aggressive side to him.
Very good. Okay, Marlene, go ahead.
Why do we ascribe it in the negative as opposed to saying he was being urged to do something, as opposed to being drawn to the negative part? And the second thing is, when you promise something, why does it have to be today? It's a future promise. You will be the father of nations, but you may not see them. It may not be in your lifetime, but you will set it up.
Yeah.
So let me answer the second question first, which is, if I'm only just going to try and play not Abraham was not a simple person, but if you are chosen and you have been selected to win this prize, you are going to be the father of a nation. Okay, so how long do you need to live in order to show that as the reality? In fact, I would argue that Abraham's constantly pushing the limits of that promise and trying to make it happen, but he has this is why the story is so interesting. It's almost impossible for him to create a nation because, they're not able to have children and they're old. So God has placed an enormous challenge upon him that he will not fulfill, but it's the transmitting of that challenge to next generation and the next generation that is certainly what God intends, notwithstanding the fact that I think it's possible for Abraham to interpret, yeah, it's going to be me. I argued in my explanations on Rosh Hashanah that Lech Lecha is singular. Lech Lecha follows the paradigm of the heroic founder who goes by himself. A religious founder, it's a solitary journey. Okay, all religions, are founded by single, and they happen to be male. The founders of religions are male and single individuals, and they tend to go on journeys, okay? Whether it's in antiquity or even, the Mormons, okay? Their families are secondary. What makes Abraham unique, I think, is that when God says to him, go forth, meaning go as an individual, he takes his family. They want to come with him. And I believe that this is this is an unstated, tension in the Torah, which is, you want me to found something, but I have obligations to my family, and my family, my obligation to my family is my moral obligation. And I'm not going to subordinate my moral obligation to whatever you say. So you want me to go? I'm going to go with everybody. That's what Abraham does. That's what makes him such a great character. And Yaakov here also, so Yaakov is here, he is shorn of his sibling, he is shorn of his parents, he has literally nothing. So Yaakov is going to become now the paradigm of the solitary founder. And he is now going to go on the journey. His journey is a journey of exit and a journey of re-entrance, a journey of embarkation and re-entrance. And that's what God is, where we see him at this juncture. And it's not an accident, you've all pointed out the angels, the angels are there to accompany him in a metaphorical way, protect him, precisely because he is now going to be embarking on the unknown. Jacob is going to be living in the moment of, it's a universal moment where you go from the known to the unknown. And when you go from the unknown, you are literally living on the edge. And the dream signifies the edge that he is living on is not only an edge in the plane of space, it's in the plane of time and also in the domain of earth to heaven. I think, and Jakovich points this out. I'll read another couple of pages from him. He points this out that when you are looking at him, Jacob is located on three axes. There's the axes of present in time, I guess you would call it the x-axis, right? The axis of where he is in time, where he is in space, and where he is in terms of his connection with God. Wow. I think this is a fascinating moment where it's precisely at that moment where time, space, and the spiritual realm all intersect. Okay. Let me take a couple. Anybody else want to say anything, or go ahead, Bob?
Just a comment. They promised to be Av Hamon Goyim, father of many nations. All these wives barely could have children. So it's also a little conflict.
Yeah, that's the Bible's way of saying that God overrules nature. Bob, you wanted to say something?
Yes, if I'm not mistaken, I read someplace that en route to this place, he actually stopped to study in the temple in the Eva or Shem or something. And so I think your point about him wrestling with what he's done in the past, where he is now, and where he's going is very much for me on point. Something I read from Hasidic or even Kabbalistic views about Abraham being Chesed and Yitzhak being, if you will, Gevura or strictness, and that Yaakov is sort of Tifirat in terms of the interconnection of different things. And there's a term in anthropology called liminality, which
Yes.
is sort of being in between and in transition. And so whether he's horizontally going this way or that way, vertically, that there's all these different things in his interactions with people. And the late Rabbi Sachs talked about the fact that with evil in the world that he was dealing with later with Laban and with others, the ability to negotiate, to interact, to wrestle, if you will, with this feels very consistent with what you're saying, I hope.
These are very powerful themes, and they are consistent, and they respond to deeply rooted human archetypes. You know, I mean, to go out into the unknown is to live in liminality. Liminality is you know, that idea of you are at the edge, or you are between past and future in the present. You know, you are at a moment of being totally alive, right? It's when you are about to conquer the unknown or about to set out in the unknown that you have this confluence of emotions: fear, anxiety, but also hope, and also the sense of, you know, what is the possible, what you know, belies you. Look, I mean, none of us have had this experience in the last 8 months, but part of the normal experience of modern living is to take a trip. You know, I one of the jokes that I have with people is, you know, where's the first place you're going to go to, God willing, after all of this is over, right? And so what we are forgetting in the experience of taking a trip is all of the anticipation prior to it, and especially like if you fly, right? Flying used to be glamorous and enjoyable. It's not. But what you have there is the experience of, you know, preparation, and the experience of boarding, and the experience of arrival. And it's precisely each one of those moments that is liminal, in the sense that you are always crossing over boundaries. You're always experiencing past, present, and future, your past and future in the present. You know, especially, you know, and we may not recognize it when you just, you know, hop in your car and drive, but I'm sure you recognize it when you take a longer trip. You know, we've all experienced you know, flights to Israel. There's a reason why the flight to Israel is a very spiritual moment. It's not because we're going to Israel. It's because, you know, you're going to be suspended between heaven and earth on a journey, and you are going through, you know, time and space, and to a certain extent, and this is something that I think for Jews, and maybe, you know, for devout Christians, maybe devout Muslims, the idea of encountering the divine in a spiritual pilgrimage is very profound, and that it requires a certain kind of preparation. You know, that is, it's much more of a preparation than I'm going to pack my bag. So here, what is so precious about this moment is that he's got no baggage. We've remarked that he, you know, I mean, somehow he pulls out a jug of oil. I don't know where he gets that. Okay, you know, the Torah really doesn't, you know, get concerned about this little factoid that he must be walking around with a little bit of oil, you know, to anoint the rock. But
Did it
you
last
know,
for 8 days?
I'm sorry, that's very
Did it
day.
last for
He
8
doesn't,
days?
you know, it's not concerned about it. Maybe he's got a little bit of something. You know, what's so disturbing about the story is that Rebecca is in such a rush to get him on the road. You know, she does what no Jewish mother would ever do, which is she doesn't pack a whole lunch and a dinner and a suitcase full of food for him. I mean, you know, I get very upset in this story because she's given him nothing to eat. You know, she didn't go to their fridge and give him a sandwich even. You know, there's nothing. And you would think, you know, he just made this big meal for his father, there'd be a little bit of leftovers, you know, and nothing. Of course, there's no refrigeration, no way to preserve it at all. So he's empty. But it's important to understand that the emptiness will be significant when he returns, because I think it's really one of the most moving moments in the entire Torah when he returns, you know, next week, in next week's parsha, maybe we'll look at it by Shlach, you know, he says, Ki v'makli, I left with my staff, I left with nothing. But I always interpret v'makli as I left with potential. I only had potential. I had nothing else. And you hear that story, and it's why it's so moving to us, because it's the story of immigration. I came to this country with 2 pennies in my pocket. I came with nothing but the desire to work hard. I came with nothing but my head on my shoulders. I came with nothing but an idea, right? And I made it. I mean, the story of American Jewry is that story. I came with nothing on, you know, to Ellis Island. I scraped and scrimped and saved, and, you know, I bought my first truck, I bought my first store, I bought my first blah, and I now have it. It's in a way, it's the American dream, but it's also the Jewish aspiration here, and it has its model in Jacob. Jacob is the quintessential immigrant who goes with nothing, and he returns as you know, as something. It's in the Bible, you know. Let's be honest. The Bible is very much affirms the capitalist ethos that you can save and become something, right? You're not relegated to a class. You're not relegated by birth to poverty. You can pull yourself up and become something like they all did. Okay, so let's go into this text a little more. All right. In the middle of nowhere, as a day of vigorous walking draws to a close, Jacob decides to pause before continuing his journey. He came upon a place and stopped there for the night, for the sun had set. This shepherd, accustomed to wandering after his flocks, is a homebody, a tent dweller, and not a man of the outdoors, like his brother, like his where is my thing? Like his brother, alone in the back country as the dark night cast its all-encompassing shadow, without his flock or sheepdogs to ease his loneliness, Jacob has suddenly become singularly aware of his solitary predicament. He seems to have found little to comfort himself. Taking one of the stones of that place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place. Can it be that, in his rush, he hadn't stopped to gather even a single piece of clothing or blanket? We've been saying that. He has brought nothing with which to cover himself or to put under his head, and he uses a rock as a pillow, an apt illustration of his lonely circumstances. Our hero lies on the cold, hard ground, gazing upward at the stars. It's late. He closes his eyes, and he dreamed. Dreams have a prophetic quality in the Bible that allows one to peek behind the present day and glimpse into the future. Actually, dreams represent one of the Bible's primary vehicles for prophecy, one of the principal mechanisms available to humans for communicating with God. We see this when Deuteronomy mentions in one breath a prophet or a dream diviner. And Saul realizes that God in his anger did not answer him either by dreams or by Urim or by prophets. Will Jacob's dream reveal the future only, or perhaps also something that has been concealed from us till now, his private reflections or something of his present circumstances? Night closes around the sleeping Jacob, but in his dream, the stage is lit. Earth and heaven both illuminated. It begins like a silent film that is gradually revealed in 3 stages, each opening with Vihine, and behold. And behold, a stairway was set up on the ground, and its head reached to the sky. This is the only occurrence in the Bible of the term sulam, here translated as stairway, which we interpret by way of the Akkadian cognate similtu. It reminds us of the ziggurat, the stepped tower temples of Mesopotamia that served as a link between the gods in the heavens and humankind on earth. In a moment, we will look carefully at the distinct context that the Babylonian literature provides us for Jacob's dream and its implications. We don't know who placed the stairway there, but the dreamer first perceives its foundations on earth, where he is, and only afterward does his gaze rise to find its top in the sky. We notice the connection that is established between the rock that was placed under his head and the stairway with its head in the heavens. The second stage, and behold, angels of God were ascending and descending on it. First, they ascend from the lower position of the dreamer. Afterward, they descend from the top. They continue this ascending and descending, establish an unceasing connection between upper and lower spheres. The angels provide company for Jacob. No longer is he alone. This is important. I think the observation that there is divine accompaniment. A clear counterpart, and this is, it's going to go a little astray here. I may just skip this part here. He makes the point about the connection between this and Babylonia. In the dream's third stage, Jacob finally dares to look at the top of the staircase to the heavens, and behold, God was standing on it. The angels created the first connection between heaven and earth. Now God's voice reaches down to Jacob, and the silence is broken. God introduces himself. I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, and the God of Isaac, reassuring Jacob that the God of Abraham and Isaac is still also his God, even now. Moreover, prior to his leaving the land of Canaan, his father had blessed him with the blessing that God would grant him, the blessing of Abraham, the blessing of inheriting the land. Now he receives confirmation that he, not his brother, is the one chosen to continue the genealogy, and that he will inherit the land on which you are lying, I will assign to you and to your offspring. Actual circumstances penetrate into the dream as God reminds Jacob that he lies on the earth, symbolizing how the land will become his, and that his separation from it will be temporary. God also refers to Jacob's descendants, confirming the success of his present journey. Your seed shall be as the dust of the earth. You shall spread out to the west, to the east, and north, and to the south. Whereas a moment previously, Jacob's world had suddenly been compressed by an all-encompassing darkness closing around his weary body, a vast world has now opened before him. Three axes become apparent: the vertical connection between earth and heaven, the horizontal dissemination of Jacob's descendants in all four directions, and a temporal line embracing both past and future, reaching from Abraham and Isaac to Jacob and the generations that will issue from him. God's promise to Jacob indeed contains an echo of the earlier promise made to Abraham after Abraham parted from his brother's son, just as Jacob is now given the promise after leaving his brother. The Lord said to Abram, raise your eyes and look out from you where you are, to the north, the south, to the east, and the west, for I give you the land that you see, to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, then your offspring too can be counted. The continuation of Jacob's blessing, all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you and your seed, further reminds us of God's blessing to Abraham, which accompanied the divine command to go forth from your land and from your birthplace and from your father's house to the land I will show you. All the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you, and was given in a similar context. Even though Jacob walks in the opposite direction, from the promised land back to the land of his grandfather's birth, it is precisely at this point, as he leaves the land of Canaan, that he needs a blessing that will promise his return. But promises for the future are not enough. Jacob urgently needs support for now. He needs protection, knowledge that he is not alone on his journey into the unknown. And truly, his fortification is not long in coming. And behold, I am with you. I will protect you wherever you go, and will return you to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Does the vertical movement of the angel symbolize Jacob's movement to Haran and back, even giving material expression to God's protection? This was the conclusion of the rabbis, who distinguished between two groups of angels, those who ascended and those who descended. Angels that accompany man in the land do not accompany him outside the land. The ones who ascend are those that accompany him into the land of Israel. Those who descend accompany him outside the land. Okay, so what we have here is just a very beautiful interpretation. Let me just go on. Okay, what we have here then is Jacob makes a vow. Jacob makes a vow that expresses his expectation that God promises will be fulfilled and that God will protect him from all evil. He does not refer to the larger matters included in God's promises regarding land and plentiful descendants. His thoughts are firmly in the present, on the challenges he must face in order to survive the present journey. If God is with me and protects me on this way that I go and gives me bread to eat and clothing to wear, and I return safely to my father's house, and the Lord will be my God. And this stone which I have set up will be the house of God. I will set a tithe for you. All right. He says it's worth comparing God's promise, and I'm going to do just a little bit of this more in depth. Whereas God promises protection on all of Jacob's future paths, Jacob thinks only of the present path. And to God's promise, Jacob adds the most fundamental necessities, bread to eat and clothing to wear. Of course, Jacob's specific mention of food and clothing reminds us of the two acts that awakened his brother's fury, the purchase of the birthright with food and his securing the blessing using his brother's clothing. Does Jacob also think these previous acts as he make his vow? Interesting, why God promises to return to the land, the promised land, Jacob's wish is to return home safely to my father's house. Let me just do this a little better, okay? So this is on the left is what God says, and the right is what Jacob says. All right. So God stands with him, and God says, "V'hinei anochi imach," and Jacob says, "Im yeh Elohim imadi," if God will be with me. Ushmarticha bechol asher telech, and Jacob says, and if you guard me, shmarani b'derech hazeh asher anochi alech, the one, aderech hazeh. Okay. So there's a difference between bechol asher telech. God is saying, I will guard wherever you go. And Jacob saying, guard me on this journey. And then Jacob adds, and if you give me lechem, and if you give me beged. And what Zakovich is saying is, he is asking for lechem, and he is asking for beged, precisely to cue the idea that he manipulated his brother with food and with beged, with clothing. V'shavti v'shalom el beit avi, as opposed to what God says, I will bring you back to this land. And Jacob says, I want to come back to my father's household. Okay. So the question, and we don't have time to really analyze this in general and in specific, is Jacob is really I'm going to just stop it here and say, pursuant to my theme, the theme that all patriarchs, maybe with the exception of Isaac, so Abraham and Jacob, are defiantly obedient. I almost want to say our ancestors have a little bit of chutzpah, maybe a lot of chutzpah. They're constantly arguing with God, and they're constantly, it's like God is saying, I'm going to do this and do this for you. And Jacob says, you're being too general. You need to be more specific with me. Don't tell me you're going to bring me back to the land. Tell me that you're going to bring me back to my father's household. Don't tell me that you're going to keep me. Tell me that you're going to provide me food and clothing. Don't tell me this. Tell me specifically this way. I want to know specifics. Okay? It takes a lot of chutzpah to demand of God specifics. I don't think that many of us would react in that same way. Were we to experience God in a direct revelatory way, we wouldn't say, well, wait a minute. You said this, but I want you to do this. It's quite chutzpahdik. And what makes Jacob, I think, complicated, a rich character, is that he has intuited the character type of his grandfather, and he is basically relating to God in the same way that his grandfather related to God. His grandfather was questioning God. His grandfather did make a bargain. His grandfather did behave with a kind of defiance. And here Jacob is being told to go on a journey, and he I think at the first stage of this journey, he wants to personalize this journey. He wants to customize this journey. He wants to make this his journey and not the journey that was foisted upon him by the circumstances that we described earlier on in the class, meaning that, as Ellie said, he was passive. He was told to lead. No, and I think this is Tova. This is his greatness. His greatness is he takes the circumstances that were foisted upon him and he makes them his own. And he understands now, Bob, what the nexus is of past, present, and future, heaven and earth, and all the spatial, temporal, and spiritual dimensions or axes of his life. These are all present here at this moment. Go ahead, Bob.
Thank you.
Is there any significance to the fact that it says God will be with him rather than above, below, before, or behind, as it sometimes is said in different places?
I think that there's tremendous significance in God will be with me, because that is another theme that we see associated with all the patriarchs and with Moses himself and with Joseph and with and it's in it's one of my favorite lines in the Psalms. It's Psalm 23. Gam ki elech begeitz ha'mavet lo irara ki ata imadi. Though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. I've maintained many times in sermons and classes that if you want to compress Judaism into two words, ata imadi is Judaism. Ata imadi is the idea that you have a relationship. And here, in the broadest sense, what is being forged here in this moment is the relationship between Jacob and God. Up until now, we have not had that. Jacob has not been spoken to God. There's not been any revelation. Jacob has been very much the product of home. Despite the fact that if you do the chronology here, he's quite an old man here. He's well into his 70s he's well into his 70s when he goes on this journey. But up until now, everything was dictated to him. And I think, Ellie, your comment before was very astute. Up until now, he was not the author of his destiny. I think the transition that is happening here is that Jacob will now become the author of his destiny. He's saying to God, God is saying to him, I'm going to keep you, I'm going to, and what he's saying to God is, yeah, okay, but on my terms. I want you to do this for me. I want you to provide me clothing and food. I want you to provide me the journey. I want you to get me back to my household. You are being general and I am being specific. And that kind of counter tells me that he is trying to now be the author of his own destiny. So this moment, the dream, is not only a revelation of the divine plan and the divine promise, but it is the revelation of the divine, of the personal challenge to Jacob. And he will recognize this moment. Certainly we'll come back to it next week. He'll recognize this moment when he refers back to it. He says, I left this land with nothing. I was aware of the fact that at embarkation what I was leaving with. I remember getting on the boat. I remember getting in the bus. I remember packing up and going away for the first time. You know, these are precious liminal moments. The moment you immigrate, the moment you said goodbye to your parents, the moment I mean, I had queued up here the Anatevka scene. You know, you just take 2 seconds. I mean, we're already way over, but you'll see here, the Anatevka scene is almost the inverse of it's not here. Never mind. Go. Oh, wait a minute. Second. Sorry. Here. Go.
And get the out.
Okay. Here we go.
Together with the people of Zolodin. Maybe they.
Oh, you see it? No, you don't see it. Do you see it now?
Yes, we see it.
We should defend ourselves. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Very good. That way the whole world will be blind and toothless.
Rabbi, we've been waiting for the Messiah all our lives. Wouldn't this be a good time for him to come?
We'll have to wait for him someplace else. Well, let's start packing.
And they go on and sing Anatevka.
After all, what have we got here?
A little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Okay. So I'm sorry. It's so beautiful in that it's in a way an alternate universe of child here. I mean, I brought it, as a really a contrasting illustration. Jacob is the personal solo trip, and Anatevka, Fiddler on the Roof, is the archetype of the communal trip. I mean, it's and you can see the pain of it. I mean, the movie does, I think, a very good job of reflecting the pathos of what it means to disassemble an entire community. You don't have the terror of it as you had, in other scenes, certainly in the Holocaust. This is the pre-Holocaust Europe. The complete collapse of community, the complete disassembly, and the emigration en masse, complete with the sense of the unknown, and it's almost the inverse of this moment. Jacob is a moment of promise. Certainly, Anatevka is a moment. They understand it on another level as a level of promise. It doesn't quite capture that, but I would urge you to watch it yourselves. Okay.
Rabbi?
Any last comments, and then we'll go. Yeah, go ahead, Susie.
That phrase, B'chol asher telech, that occurs also, I believe, with Joshua.
Yeah.
Do you want to make any kind of?
I think it's also with Devorah, in telchi, not B'chol asher telech, but yeah, it's about relationship. That is I will be with you wherever you go. That's the relational construction for God and Jacob. Yes.
Also Ruth and
Ruth and Naomi. Absolutely. Very
But
good.
this is the exact same words of God speaking to.
Yes.
with
Yes.
Joshua.
All right, folks, we have to leave it there. We got maybe one verse. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.